well with this. And Alex and Mira will be joining at different points as well today, as well as Vernon's very kindly put himself forward. Just what would be really good in the chat, for those of you who are joining us at 5 o'clock, if you could indicate what you do and why you do it and what you're really passionate about. No web links, please. It's all about us understanding what's really important for you, but also be bold with your questions. So in this session, it'll be much more of an interview, and then the 3 table champions will in effect be fielding the questions for you on stage a little bit later on. So I'll give a little bit of an insight into myself, and obviously, Chris, if you could very kindly give an introduction as well in a moment. But I founded Business Growth Bureau about 6 years ago. I'm absolutely passionate about helping leaders and CEOs of companies to focus on business growth. Obviously, we are specialists in LinkedIn, but the big passion within me, as it were, is to look after all the individual stakeholders, whether clients, prospects, suppliers, associates, investors. If you could try and make everyone feel good about their relationship, because ultimately what happens is people want to work with you and the other way around. Chris, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction into yourself now?
Yes, Chris Cooper. I'm really passionate about helping organisations to develop and grow, but realize their potential. Really, that's my purpose in life: helping others realize their potential. So I work with leadership teams and with organisations, and I help them build highly engaged workplaces as well. So through various means of bespoke programs and workshops and coaching and speaking and those sorts of things. I'm also the host of the Business Elevation Show, which has been going on for nearly 10 years on Voice America. It's the largest business show on their network last year. And I co-authored a book called Power to Get Things Done. So that's probably me, really.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. So we're moving now into the next session. We've already talked about what topics are going to be covered, but Chris, really, this is over to you now, if you're okay to ask the relevant questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer those on the fly. So let's give it a shot. So, Chris, and what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my slide deck for the moment. So you got those questions of key points in front of you, Chris?
I've got them on a piece of paper. So
lovely. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing the screen and see whether we can go a little bit more into this mode. So, Chris, over to you.
So great. So Rupert, lovely to talk to you about this subject of finding high value clients in a rapidly changing marketplace. And I think obviously, Rupert, your background and Business Growth Bureau really helps people to do this on LinkedIn, but also through other kinds of means. So we had some great questions on my table as well, and dialogue. So thanks to all of you. I wish I had a bit longer to talk to you, and I'll try and draw on some of those that information and learning through this conversation. But I think firstly, Rupert, it'd be really good, I think, to just actually define what high value clients mean, because is this about finding clients that are going to generate you lots of money immediately, or we're looking at lifetime values of clients? Or so let's talk about that. Then I want to talk about the market as well, and maybe what's really happening out there.
Right, lovely. Thank you for that, Chris. Honestly, high value clients is going to vary enormously from one person to another. So, for example, you may have got, in fact, I think there's someone here today who specialise in putting together proposals and tenders for larger organisations. And obviously a good piece of work on that can be worth a reasonable sum of money. But, it may be the average value of sale for a high value sale might be £2,000 to £5,000, whatever that figure is. And it may be a lower cost value of sale might be £500 or £1,000. Whereas in the case of a technology company that I can think of, their low value of sale is typically perhaps a scoping piece of work, which might be a £50,000 project, and their typical average value of sale is sort of £2 to £5 million. So, of course, that answer is going to vary enormously from one company or individual to another. The challenge is, of course, is how do you reach them? Especially with that. Now, sometimes what happens is people will try and reach the high value clients and expect them to spend that £500,000 or 100,000 or 50,000 pounds straight off the bat. And of course, one of the big challenges is that even with the larger organisations, typically they will want to try you on something first. So if your core value proposition over the lifetime of value of a client, or say over a 12-month period, is £50,000, they may want to start you off on trying something at £5,000 or £10,000, see how well that goes, and then people may then want to interject. So I don't know whether that clarifies that a little bit about the core, what client deems as a high value. You could equally have a high value client in certain other situations, which could be below £1,000. But of course, that may be a much higher volume business, or it may be, for example, that you're in a very competitive space, and that's the maximum that the market will bear. So I don't know whether that answers that question to a degree.
I mean, could it be? I'm just thinking of a gentleman I once interviewed who talked to me about how he had 7 people in his network that he generated multi-millions of pounds through. But he said, one of them had only ever spent directly about £3,000 with him. But he nurtured those relationships, took them out to dinner several times together, even every year. And his business thrived through that 7. So he would see him as a high value client, because actually through him, he's generated several £million of business. So maybe is that high value about reaching the right people, developing the right relationships, and maybe you're doing something free for a start, but you're nurturing that, which ultimately leads to hopefully great opportunity.
Yes, and quite. And the good thing as well is through some very good targeting, it is possible to reach those high value clients. But there's all sorts of strategies around that, which I'm sure we'll come to a little bit later on as well.
So is it? I want to talk about this rapidly. You've said in a rapidly changing market, and obviously there's lots of in the market as such. There's lots of sub-markets, so there's different conditions in each of those going on. But maybe what's is a bit different right now is that underneath of what is visible with people, and I'm seeing it visibly now as well, is the situation with COVID and worries and stress and the media. And I saw last week, an article, a headline on the BBC, which really annoyed me, which was, "We're in a global pandemic. Here's the other things that you need to be worried about." And that just really, really irritated me. But I'm seeing a lot going on with people and a lot going on with my clients. And I'm just thinking, in that changing market, is that something we need to consider today as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. And unfortunately, the BBC seems to be full of a lot of negativity at the moment. And Sky News isn't much better at the moment. But then I suppose, there are lots of challenges out there. But the trouble is, I think the difficulty is people fill their heads with all this negativity. And the trouble is, if you hear it all the time, it's you can get too much. And I can't remember who said it, but someone said this afternoon, just on one of the tables, that they've got this policy now of only watching the news twice a week. And I think that's a really good point, because otherwise, you could end up with a lot of very depressed people out there.
Are we seeing, Rupert? Is it is it the reality that everything is is difficult at the moment, or is it just how we see it? And I'm just I'm thinking. I read a quote. I interviewed a president of Intel, and there was a quote from a former CEO, Andy Groves, which said, "Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive them, and great companies are improved by them." So is it a mental attitude that we need to adopt right now and keep ourselves upbeat and energized, ignore all of this, a lot of this rhetoric that's going on in the media, and rise above it?
I'm slightly smiling here, Chris, as well, because you spot my thunder for next Tuesday. So...
I don't know what you're doing on Tuesday.
No, you're not. So that's why I'm sort of smiling at the same time as you said that. But that quotation is so true at the end of the day. And whether we like it or not, this is, in effect, almost the making or breaking of us, I think, unfortunately. Certainly, I'm sure we probably agree, this is probably one of the worst experiences that we've certainly had in our lifetimes. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I think there's several different scenarios. Obviously, if you're one's a micro business, we're running a very small business, the tendency is for us to go very much in on ourselves. Now, some of that, of course, can be good because it's a time of reflection, which I think you refer to a lot, Chris. It's a time of reflection, and it's a chance to reevaluate what we're doing and everything else that goes with it. And that's good. But the difficulty is, of course, we still have to put food on the table, still have to feed our families. This is where I say is we should be looking outwards. Unfortunately, the ones that do can purely look inwards, especially if they can't cut the cost base very low and they can't also increase sales, then of course those are the type of people that unfortunately can end up by not being able to, their business doesn't survive, which is a real shame. There's a big chunk in the middle where people do go inwards and they start to reevaluate, and then they start to then look outwards. They start to put in place marketing strategies to start to grow again, and then as part of that, they actually perhaps ride the storm, and they come out on the other side, and they've got a nice business again, which is really good. But the ones which really thrive are the ones that look at the current crisis we're in, look at their business, look at how they can pivot their business, look at sectors which are doing very well at the moment. And, there are certain obvious sectors which are doing well, and I dread to mention the Amazon word or the Google word or the Microsoft. Look at some of those platforms, how they're doing. Look at how this platform has just come up, the last 6-12 months. Certain technology-based platforms or which are really benefiting from this pandemic. But there's, as we talked about the other day, there's lots of smaller businesses where they've been able to pivot. So we talked about companies that specialise in sheds, not our sheds, where they convert them into home offices or tubs. Because people perhaps want to spend more time with family or friends. Obviously, time with friends can be difficult in a lockdown area at the moment. But nevertheless, those businesses which have pivoted in those areas which are largely benefiting from the pandemic, then clearly they've been able to either adapt their model or reposition their business so it should do well. But then it's a case of what you can put in place to really leverage it. Do you take the view, okay, there's a really good opportunity now. Do I go outside to raise further investment? Do I put in place really strong growth strategies? And they're the ones that thrive and really grow and then potentially scale as well. So that quote, I think, is actually immensely powerful. And thank you for bringing that one up, Chris.
That's okay, and it is. I think also Marco, who we had on the show recently, and he really also mentioned that too, didn't he? The importance of looking at different market opportunities, how things have changed. Who knows? People are probably making millions out of face masks at the moment. There are so many different opportunities and new products that are rising that weren't there before. I see somebody who's in printing with a fantastic name, Tom Brown. I'm thinking about Tom Brown's school days at the moment. Is sort of cropping up. My son, 10-year-old, this week gave me a card that he's created for Christmas, and it had a picture of he'd created of Father Christmas with a face mask, and the little joke was, "Oh no, I forgot to sanitize my sleigh," and which I thought was really great. And but actually, a year ago, Rupert, if he produced that card, we'd be thinking, what's he on about? And actually, so many things have changed, haven't they, over the last year? And we've just got to be careful to that, perhaps, and maybe just not stay on the same trajectory. We question it.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah. So then the question that links to then, how do you adapt your product offerings to, maybe suit the market that you're in?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think one of the things that I would look at, and actually a very good place to start that is, well, two areas actually. If you went in, for example, to Facebook, if you were doing some Facebook ads, for example, you can actually do some very good targeting on that, but it's based on the psychographic information predominantly. But some of the clues you can get in there are by some of the insights you get beforehand. But better still, in the business-to-business context, if you go into LinkedIn and if you look for industry classifications, there's actually 147 of those. And what I would suggest almost doing is downloading that list. Actually, I don't think you can download this, but do a screen grab of it. Or if not, just message us afterwards or message Muriel, so Muriel@businessgrowthbureau.com, and she'll send you a list through. And what you could do is, if you prioritize from that list the sectors which you feel the greatest opportunities are actually in, and which are benefiting from this pandemic, and also as we start to come out of it, that's some really good pointers to go for. And the nice thing is, once you work that out as well, you can also start to look at some of the other avatars of ideal clients and really start to hone that down based on your primary target markets, if that makes sense.
So there's the need at the moment then to think about our kind of client sweet spot, which Nikki, with the words Nikki used earlier on our group, and we can use LinkedIn to help us do that. But I suppose the danger is if we're not careful, if we don't do that, we can end up putting a lot of wasted time into sectors that are in decline, and they're going to be harder and harder. So that's going to lead, isn't it, to our demise if we don't get smart.
Well, quite. I mean, obviously there are certain sectors. Sorry, I didn't mean to across you, Chris. The sectors there, for example, it may be a really bad example actually, but aviation is an obvious one which is being very badly hit at the moment. But for example, just because an industry sector is being very badly hit, it doesn't mean to say that it's still not a good sector to go for, because obviously in those scenarios there's a lot of pain there, and typically the CEOs of companies are really wanting to try and turn their business around. But the difficulty is, the larger companies, it's quite a specialist form of knowledge or expertise that you need to have to be able to assist in that type of space. So if it is a very damaged sector, it doesn't mean it's not a good opportunity, because they need the help and support. But it's just a case where they're in the mindset of spending money with you, I guess, on that product, service or widgets, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I love that. There's a new phrase. Thank you, Daniel, which I like that. So moving from sunset sectors to sunrise sectors.
Nice. Yeah. And actually, taking that argument a bit further, Daniel, I'm going to steal your phrase. I like that. Thank you very much. But in fact, what would be an even bigger opportunity is if you're able to almost follow the sun in your business. So in which case you're making your product or service appeal to multiple countries, let alone multiple continents. Now, it may be too big a ask, but there is a very simple way you can do that for a lot of businesses. And of course, with the currency of the web, or be able to transact a lot online now, we're not confined to just the UK anymore. We've obviously got Europe, we've got the US, we've got Asia, Australasia, Middle East, and so on. So we don't. And there's certain countries which are much less badly affected by what's going on than others. Or New Zealand, obviously, I know the population's tiny, but thank goodness over there they've been relatively lightly, not particularly badly impacted. In fact, coronavirus is a case in point. Trying to avoid the use of that word. Is over there they more or less eradicated it, which is amazing. But there we go.
So I'm feeling that there's, from what you're saying, there's a need for us all to do a bit of market intelligence, some research into where our businesses are sitting at the moment, and those areas that are developing, maybe growing, maybe even some new markets we've not thought before, and really consider those. So social media, I'm interested to explore too how we find high value clients using social media. I'm also just before we do that, I'm getting a lot of people approaching me on social media a lot at the moment, and it's starting to put me off a little bit as well. So I'm just intrigued about how you do that in a very approach as well, in a very authentic way, to and get perceived appropriately through the clutter.
And to rise above the noise.
Because I'm actually getting a bit tired now of just going in and of lots and lots.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of degree. Is it LinkedIn in particular, or are you talking about Facebook, or which platforms are we
It's
talking?
LinkedIn in particular, actually, for me, is there's a lot of people who are, people connect with you, and then it turns out they help coaches develop high ticket, various things. I know you've been in the marketplace a lot longer than a lot of people, and there's also a lot of people offering your service around LinkedIn, but you've been in the market right from the outset. So there's a lot of charlatans that have come in since.
Yeah, yeah.
But so you've been right at the outset and helping people do this, and in some respect, I see you as the credible source in the market. But how do you find high value clients today in this current market when a lot of people are sitting at home using social media to do this? How do we maybe outsmart them a bit and do this really effectively?
Yeah, I think the first part has been human, as much as possible. And obviously, I know it sounds like I'm being sort of caveating that a little bit. The difficulty with all social media platforms, broadly speaking, in order to get real exposure, unless you're Gary V, or you're Donald Trump, or got a very big name behind you, in which case you've got massive followings in your own right. But in the vast majority of platforms, of course, you have to pay to play, as a phrase I would use. For example, on Facebook, you used to get a lot of traction by writing posts and articles and put them through a Facebook group or a page, but in real terms these days, there's hardly any traction you get back unless you pay for some form of advertising. LinkedIn was a very good place to write content. It still is, but it's also getting a lot more noisy there too, because people are choosing to put content out there. And as it gets more saturated, LinkedIn will no doubt start to work their algorithms. So in order to get some form of traction, you will probably have to pay to play again. The one area which has been relatively left alone, and it would be much more difficult for LinkedIn to do anything about, is at the end of the day, on the one big strength is that you can communicate at a personal level on LinkedIn very easily, especially if people are in your network. So, and that's obviously through direct messaging. The trouble is there are people out there, and there are also organizations out there which don't provide very high quality training, and they'll overtly encourage you to go out straight with a sales message when you're reaching out to people for the first time. And then there's an analogy which I quote a lot of the time, which is basically you have to go through the dance first, certainly if you want any full meaningful relationship. And that's about showing interest in the other person, wanting to engage, wanting to ask questions. Now, obviously, you can do that manually. If you were to want to really grow and be successful on LinkedIn, you probably would have to spend 3 to 5 hours a day, and I'm not exaggerating, if you want to maximize the potential. It doesn't mean to say you have to do that. You can, spend half an hour a day and get a little bit of traction that way. But to actually make the best out of it, you would be spending 3 to 5 hours a day. So, plus there's the complexities of actually remembering who you've got in touch with and what stage they've reached in terms of the engagement process. And it is a case, as much as possible, using technology where possible to leverage those conversations or leverage the outreach. But of course, at the end of the day, once people start to engage, it's very much a case of having those one-to-one conversations, trying to get them off the platform people off the platform as quickly as possible. And it's not about pitching, not going with a sales pitch. It's about going in, showing interest, asking questions. In effect, what you're asking people to do is to flag a very early stage of interest. And then from that point onwards, as much as possible, try and get people offline, have a 15-minute conversation or a 30-minute conversation, again, show you care, and then obviously take people through a journey. And if they want to work with you and interact with you, they will. That's the bottom line. So I don't know if I answered that question. A bit of a long answer. Sorry about that, Chris.
So I just, are we saying here, Rupert? So Daniel's just spent 5 hours a day on LinkedIn. Would you not change your role from professional to shop window dresser? I think what he's saying is you'd be spending, your job would become working on LinkedIn. I mean, the challenge I always find, and I'm sure some of those people who offer services to find, and they've got a small organisation, is that the challenge, it's often a challenge. You're delivering work, you're really busy, and you haven't got the time then to be doing things like LinkedIn effectively, and then you come out of a period of really great work and actually find you've not got a lot following in the sort of pipeline. Are we saying here that actually what you need is professionals to help you do this, so you don't have to spend 5 hours a day?
Yes. And I'm still trying not to make it focus around our service too much. At the end of the day, I believe it's about forward to shared value. But what we still can offer this on request. But we used to offer like a done with you service where we could run campaigns for our clients. And because we would spend the 3 to 5 hours a day ourselves running it, because we'd use human beings to do that outreach, clients were having to invest a fairly meaty sum of money to get that type of work done. And the other option you've got is you could do it yourself. But the difficulty if you're doing it yourself, you're not really valuing your time, or it's just, if you must do that, then use a virtual assistant or someone like that to help you.
Yeah.
But even then, that would cost you far more than some of the other methods out there. And the way technology is advanced, and it's not AI or artificial intelligence, that would be wrong to say, but using some of the methodologies we can show you and tools we can give people, you can actually do a lot of that work yourself, but using technology, so you can reduce that time from 3 to 5 hours a day down to about 30 minutes a day. And there's a very big difference there. And the big thing is then those people who are engaging and asking questions, then of course you could personally respond to those and everything else. But the big thing is there's no pay-per-click. So whereas get LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, predominantly to get traction, unless you've got a massive brand in your own right, personal brand in your own right, you have to pay to play. With this, you don't predominantly, apart from possibly a LinkedIn Premium or a Sales Navigator account. So there are good solutions around that as well.
Yeah, one of the things on with LinkedIn and social media, and I'm probably going to ask a question from our group here because it's kind of fits in. But how do you utilize that to really focus in on the people that who might want your service? I'll give you an example here. So Michael Sherry, who offers sort of tax type accountancy service, he's trying to reach residential landlords with £2 to £10 million of residential letting property. Pradeep is trying to reach people who are in their 50s and 60s and may not be on social media and might be a bit depressed at the moment and maybe need some coaching because they've had a great career, they've ended their career and they're thinking, what the heck's next? Are there smart ways that we can utilize social media to reach those kinds of people, or is it a different approach? Is it just one of the tools in the toolbox?
Well, this is a really interesting point. Going back to what we were saying earlier on, Facebook as a case in point, is very good on finding people based on psychographic data. So by that, it means whether married, single, their interests, their hobbies, their sexual orientation, and all the other good things around it. Whereas LinkedIn is very good on searching by, industry sector, of which I'm 47, by level of seniority, by size of company. You can key phrase search, so you can do some very powerful search around that. You can, which includes things like a job title, position. You can also search by years of experience. You can search by distance and location, and that's without having to pay to play, as it were. So that is very powerful. But there are things you can't search for. So, for example, you can't search by turnover of a business. Okay. Now, that may sound, well, that's a bit of a drawback, but one of the problems that exist, especially in the UK, is the vast majority of companies which have a turnover of less than £7 million, whatever the audit threshold is, there's no requirement for them to publish their, turnover figures in any shape or form. So that's not publicly available. So in real terms, you probably only wouldn't, even if you used other services out there, it'd be quite difficult to find that information out by that part alone, simply because it's not published. There's no requirement to publish at a company's house. So obviously, number of employees is an indicator. But let's take Michael Sherry as a case in point. Let's say he's after property professionals or high net worth individuals. There are certain things that you may know which may be helpful. So, for example, it may be that certain parts of the country have high property values, and therefore, by definition, people are typically higher income earners because they live in certain postcode districts in say, London, or it might be Manchester, or wherever it may be. You might also know that traditionally they're a little bit older by demographic. You can't search by age on LinkedIn, but what you can do is search by years of experience. So if you search for 10 years plus experience, you know that someone is highly likely to be in their late 20s and much more likely to be in their mid 30s or 40s. Okay, so that's a good way around it. You can also try and narrow things down where predominantly they are areas where there's a high propensity of home ownership. Now, again, you'd have to do search around postcode and distance, but you can get quite smart around that. And then what you do is you might end up with a list, I'm making it up here, but say 600 people. But then what you can do is preview that list and then pre-approve those. So you save that as a filed list, and that becomes almost like your target. So with Pradeep's example, that was much more, I think some of that cut across more the personal side as well. So it might be someone who's in a career. They perhaps got to the pinnacle of their career, that they perhaps are worried about being laid off, or they might have already been furloughed, as a case in point. Pradeep might be after someone who traditionally has earned quite a good wage up till the time of this pandemic. So you can't search for that information so well. But you could search based on job title. You could search, again, use years of experience. You could search for certain industry sectors which you know you're particularly strong in. So that would be a big help. But a large part of that is also going back a few steps and work out the ideal avatars for your clients. So try and think of the different clients you've got, give them names, even if they don't have names, because perhaps you haven't got them at this point in time. Try and create an identity around them, flip chart it all out, and see what you come up with. And then that really helps with targeting.
Yeah. I think, like Paul Fagan said, you have to fish in a pool where you find your fish. I think in Michael's case, I'd be looking for the associations that these people belong to, and then potentially, being referred in by them. So, developing a relationship with the people who know your marketplace.
Yeah,
would be the kind of approach I would adopt.
Leslie, a point there as well, actually.
Yeah,
because Facebook users now, it's of course the younger audience tend to go more for Instagram and things like that as well now. So it's a great point, Leslie. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I keep talking about TikTok, my kids. Everybody makes me too young, probably. So let's talk about how do we. A lot of my work comes from referrals. So how do we develop referral relationships, Rupert, and that really, and referral strategies that enable us to get to people? Because I had a situation recently where 3 people I'd worked with in the past highly recommended me to somebody, and I went to see them, and I was a bit astonished when they said, they had to talk to you because this person, this one, and this one have all highly recommended you. It was a company, and it was obviously an easy conversation from that perspective. That's more powerful than you going out and telling someone how great you are, isn't it?
100%, especially if it's a very highly qualified referral like that from a very credible source. And, referrals, in fact, and we touched on that a bit earlier on, is a great source of business. The difficulty is it's not very scalable. Well, it is scalable, but if you're going to make it scalable, you have to be very strategic over it. So in that, if it's on the more the scalable end, it'd be more a case of thinking about who are your personal champions out there, who actually love what you do, and then try and think about, okay, well, how can I actually really support those champions to make me want them to really introduce me? And it might be, that what you do is, as a case in point, as you may remember from before, with the previous business, we managed to create over 3,000 active supporters or champions for that service we're offering at the time. Now, it doesn't have to be large numbers, like it could be just 5 or 10, but in effect, they became very good referrals. So, and the quality of what came through was very, very high. So that can come a lot from champions or ambassadors that really love what you have to offer. But it's also about how you can then further support them. So, for example, what can you do to help them achieve their objectives? Is there a way that you could go back to that champion and say, are there 2 or 3 people who you feel where I could add massive value to, and I could assist? but referrals can be a bit like the 192 bus. You can get 2 or 3 really good ones in quick succession. Then, it's like the Sahara Desert for a while where nothing very much comes along for 2 or 3 months. And of course, in the time of the pandemic, when perhaps things are a bit thinner on the ground, we just all have to work a little bit harder at that. And this is why having what we class as a balanced, not only product portfolio, but a balanced marketing portfolio, where we've got different sources of new leads and opportunities coming through, whether it's through referrals or via email or through LinkedIn, or it could be Facebook, wherever it is, then think about how you can make everyone feel good about working with you.
Yeah, that's a mix. I suppose how you. I was there's somebody in my network who has a training business, and they identified 7 people a number of years ago in their network who were past. Some of them were past clients or people who referred them. And what they did is they made a point of taking them out for a meal together and got them to know each other and help them together. Which so business was generated together through these people. But looking back after 15 years in business, those 7 people had generated him £12 million of work. So that was quite a smart strategy, I thought, to really nurture those relationships and give them some value by bringing them together. And I suppose it'll be different means. He'd probably bring them together online now and saves him taking them to the Ritz or wherever he was taking them. We forget who those people are, don't we? We don't nurture the relationship enough.
Yeah, and also it positions you as being the centre of authority or credibility, doesn't it? And it's about making people feel really good about wanting to work with you too. So I noticed Leslie's made a comment there as well about LinkedIn groups, and that's a really interesting point. Now, LinkedIn groups was very good about 3-4 years ago. LinkedIn screwed it up a little bit for a while, but they've made some improvements again now, so it's a bit better. The only problem with LinkedIn groups, or a lot of groups, is that you have to first of all think where your potential clients will swim, as it were. But invariably, lots of other people are after the same people. So some of the groups, unfortunately, became very successful, and they then, what happened is they ended up being filled up with lots of people who are actually just hunters rather than wanting to nurture those conversations. So those groups have sort of died a death, as it were, over time. Perhaps large numbers, but not high quality. So it is about trying to do the right thing. But there's also other things like content and articles. Look at what people are writing about. Try and engage with those people as well. But Leslie, that's a great point there. So thank you for that. So I suppose we've got time for one more question, I guess, before we start to invite yourself again, and also Alex and Muriel in as a bit to ask questions, I guess, Chris.
Yes, I guess, how do we? We talked a little bit of example there of maybe the 7 people. Obviously, you're this sort of a process as well. You get to which you put a huge, enormous amount of work into sort of creating this and sort of fine tuning this platform. But what sort of ways can people build loyalty from with others by, I guess, that giving mentality, really?
Yeah, well, it's a big question. Of course, that's going to vary an awful lot from your sort of target audience. I think, Chris, you've come up with a really good one just now. This whole thing about being able to run, take someone out to the Ritz or to a restaurant or a hotel, be the person that connects people together and make people feel really valued. I think that's a very good example under normal times. Of course, you can replicate the same thing online now. And in some ways, you could argue it's a lot easier. But as you can see, and I've got a great thanks to you as well, because, of course, one of the things that you and I talked about in March was how can we give back? So we started these live streams and events, and Muriel was a keen supporter, and of course, since met Alex as well. And what's really nice, we're starting to get a really nice group of people together, not just clients who are lovely, but also people are joining in on these weekly sessions who become regulars, who is starting to very much build its own community and ecosystem. So that's, I was going to say it's simple to do. Actually, it's not. I probably spend a day and a half per week just trying to prepare for these type of things. And obviously your time as well, Chris, as well. which is very much appreciated. I know you run a radio show as well, which over time has created a good following, hasn't it? But with a global audience on Voice America. So, I think the other part it is about being strategic. So perhaps decide who's in your inner core, inner circle, and find ways of really looking after those people so they do feel really valued as part of the community. So I'm very lucky because obviously you're a really good example of that, Chris, and people around me. I'm very blessed to have great people around there who actually do care, and that's what the type of people we want to fill the community with. So
so I guess that some of this too is in life we hopefully we leave. We're only here for a limited period of time, and hopefully people think highly of us when we leave, and if we leave enormous amounts of money, kids will just go and spend it actually. But if we leave a good feeling and that we've helped a lot of people on the way, and they think highly of us, that's also to me that is also wealth as well, isn't it? So we have to look sometimes as to where we can do good and where we can contribute to the system. And there's a lovely quote. Maybe if I could just share it, which was the author of Moby Dick, Herman Melville. And I just wrote this down this week because I really liked it. So we cannot live for ourselves alone. Our lives are connected by 1,000 individual threads. And along those sympathetic fibres, our actions run as causes and return to us as results. So I just thought it was that thought of being connected. We're all connected by threads. We're all connected through this call. And these wonderful comments, people have been making, like Leslie and Nikki, etc., today on here. And actually, there's little ripples that we're all making through these connections, this network. We won't know all of the results, but actually, by doing good in that system, in your market, and where you operate, and through each of the interfaces you have on LinkedIn and those sorts of things, actually those ripples could ultimately add to great results for people, and some of those will come back and ultimately benefit you.
Yes, 100%. And in fact, actually, a lot of the people who are here today, including you, Chris, of course, and Alex, for that matter, are people where the conversation started off on LinkedIn. So, if you don't mind asking, are you technically a client, or have you been a client? We've done some good work before, but actually that wasn't the main motivation, was it? Really, Alex? Are you I'll let Alex answer that question. Is he a client? No. Is he a very strong support advocate? Behind it all, and you can build some really, really good relationships on platforms like LinkedIn as well. But you just have to know how to do it, and you do have to show that you care, and you follow through with people afterwards. So then we get to know each other, don't we? And actually, when opportunities come, we look after each other, and that's exactly. And that's. But you have to be prepared to give at the moment, and particularly, I think. But while at the same time being mindful that also you've got to feed the family. Well, that's right. Yes. Otherwise,
we move across now to some of the questions from the other group. So I think I probably answered some of ours from my team. But do you want to bring Alex in maybe and see what he had to say?
I think it's great. Well, Alex, I know you're able to switch on your camera. Actually, Muriel, you might want to do the same. I'm going to try and bring in Vernon as well. Or tell you what, Muriel, behind the scenes, can you try and bring Vernon? Do you know how to do that?
No. In fact, Alex has got the question, so why don't you take me out and put Vernon in?
Okay. So I can't take you out because I'm not sure how to do it, but let me try and find Vernon quickly for a second. There he is. I can see his smiley face in the profile picture here. So invite to stage. There we go. So I think you just need to accept it, Vernon. So we'll see you propelled here in just a second. You can stay there. We'd love to see you. Just need to switch your camera on, Vernon, as well. Alex, just coming to you for a moment. Your group has done a lot of work behind the scenes. What question have you got to me? Should I be dreading this question, or is it a fairly easy one for me to answer, do you think?
Well, let's pose it and then see how well you answer it, and then I can tell you whether it was easy or not.
So, Chris or Muriel, or Fern, if that matter, if they know far more.
Okay, so here's a question. And again, as usual with me, a bit of background and context first. So clearly, many businesses are trying to survive in a dramatically changed market to that which they're used to. And decision makers are facing very different business and personal risks. For big value opportunities, it can be difficult to get to those decision makers or persuade them to buy, and they might even be suffering some degree of business shell shock. So how do you help them, or maybe even your own business, go back to reevaluate and recognize their values, their view of risk, such they can see your business as the low risk answer to their fears and allow them to make a decision to buy?
Oh my God, that's a question, isn't it? Thank you, Alex. I thought you were a friend of mine. Would you do a slight favour? Can you just try and condense that down to 4 or 5?
Yeah.
So fundamentally, if people buy when they understand that you understand their risk and you are the low risk option. In the current environment, how do you get over to people that you understand their risks and you are that low risk option?
Right, okay. Any particular industry sector in mind? Just so I can try and...
Sorry.
It's more difficult. Okay, I think the first thing is to make sure that you come across and are genuinely seen as someone with integrity, honesty, credibility, that you have got a bit of a track record, that people people know that you're known for excellence in terms of your service or your product offering, and you can actually deliver that need. Now, those are all very admirable things, but the difficulty is, how do people really find out about you? A lot of people are secret detectives, in effect. I suppose there are some quite easy ways of doing that. So obviously, if you take LinkedIn as a case in point, recommendations actually do count for quite a bit on LinkedIn. Endorsements don't, but recommendations do count for quite a bit. If someone sees 5 or 10 recommendations and they all appear to be really quite genuine, authentic people with credibility, that carries quite a bit of weight. If you're writing good content or articles, people are engaging with those, so people are seeing you as being an expert, that's good. If you're known for doing certain types of charitable work or there for good causes, that helps to build on the relationship integrity and trust again. And it's the case possible trying to use methods and technology to leverage that. And then obviously on Facebook, again, with that, it's an interesting one. Facebook's become such a noisy place in particular. I would say, again, if you can put content out there, especially if you start to produce really good videos, or you're starting to do live streams, which demonstrates your caring and your expertise and your knowledge, then that's really good. That makes you a very much safer pair of hands. And then from that, it's really about then trying to get the segmentation, the targeting right. And I'm not sure I'm probably answering that question. If you want to dig a bit deeper, I'll try and answer it.
Yeah, a lot of it is about giving people the confidence that you understand them. It's not just, I've got grey hair, therefore I must be an expert. That is clearly and patently, in my case, not the case. How do you actually help them understand you know their risk and therefore you are low risk?
Right. Sorry, to repeat that last bit, I could talk to you in one bit.
How do you help them understand that you understand their risk and therefore you are low risk?
Right. Oh God.
Can I just share something that a little technique that I've had some success with in the past, and that's been when I first met potential prospects, is to ask them this question, and what's important to you, and right now about this, this maybe the supplier, or what's important to you about in your business in terms of your kind of situation, and what else is important to you, and what else is important to you, and what I do is I write these down. What else is important to you, and I maybe sound like I'm repetitive, but they're giving me answers, and I'm jotting them down. Then when I write back to them, what I use is I use their words, and it's been quite amazing actually. Sometimes that I've sat down with people and think, that proposal, it's like it's exactly what I want, and it's like I'm using their words, I'm not using mine, and I'm using their language. So I found that tool as a little tip, really quite successful.
That's really interesting, Chris, because we had that sort of discussion on our table where John uses a technique of so what, and he'll ask so what a number of times. And that takes you down through different levels. I have a similar one that is called the 5 whys, or the 3-year-old negotiation strategy. When you're dealing with a 3-year-old and tell them they can't do anything, they'll ask why. You give them an answer, they'll ask why, they'll ask why, they'll ask why. 5 whys normally get you to the nub of why something is important or a concern or a risk or whatever it might be.
I get them to prioritise. Then I might read back to them the 5 or 6. It's actually what was the most important to you, and what else is important. Just make sure that I understand the weighting of them as well.
Yeah,
Alex, I have to agree with what Chris has said, because it's what I use in my therapy work to get to the nub and the hub of where the client's at. You have to keep using and when you're working with them, you have to use their words to feed back to them when they're in that state. So yes, I agree with that.
Wow.
I've got a lovely this last couple of weeks. Actually, I was pulling a little brochure together. I got a lovely. I won't read it out, but it's a lovely testimonial from somebody. And at the end of it, they said benefits included £2 million of extra premium within 3 months. And the reason they gained that £2 million of extra premium was I taught all of their underwriters and salespeople to ask that question about what's important. Because when I asked them what was important about selling, they were selling into insurance brokers. They said it was commission, and they said it was the number one thing. I said, "Are you sure?" "Yes, it's commission." "Are you sure?" So what I taught them this technique around what was important, got them to prioritise it, and they came back after a month, because we had some gaps, 6 weeks between each session, and they came back and said, "Actually, we've asked that question, and commission's coming out as 3rd or 4th." So they went in, starting selling in on personal service, the fact they were going in one-to-one versus other, and the client in the end came back and said, "We've audited this, and we have generated £2 million of extra premium, purely based on our salespeople using that technique."
Wow. Wow, that's so powerful. You've really provoked a point there, Alex, on that one. Actually, I can see that could be a very, very big topic, very big debate. Because of timing, perhaps we could come to Vernon, if that's all right.
Well, most of the sort of things I would have asked has actually been answered by Chris, brought up by Chris anyway. But one of the things that actually we came up with and looked at was using your website. Now, obviously, either a website or a lead page, which I've added in, as a way of actually becoming your shop front, especially if it doesn't really matter whether you're a therapist or you're a service, but the shop front is something we used to use down the high street. That's gone. And a lot of people are underestimating their website and how it can now become the go-to place for people to know you. And what sort of things would you actually put on there so when people come, they're going to come to you and actually buy from you or want to buy from you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think added to which, Vernon, as well, is some of our clients that we've worked with or working with now actually haven't even had a website, interesting enough. Even in this day and age, there's one I can think of who's actually surprisingly really successful. Someone Chris and I, in fact, I took his name, he doesn't mind me talking about it. It's a guy called Michael Romling. But what he's done, he's positioned himself being an expert in his space, which he is. But he's thought about where his customers hang out, and a large part of his customers hang out on LinkedIn. So what we did a lot of work with him to make sure his profile was very well optimized, as a case in point. Because LinkedIn, it could be Facebook as well. I'm just using these as an example, and I'm not saying people should have a really good website. It's really important, but it's actually where, in effect, the analogy I'd give is something like LinkedIn is very much a microcosm in its own site, or is where people seem to spend a lot of time living. So especially if it's a one-person business where people are buying your personal expertise, and where it's important, but actually it's also extremely important where you're seen online first as well. Yeah, especially where your quality leads come from. So in terms of a question around that, is there a bit more of a question that we could ask around that as well, do you feel, that's come up from the group?
Well, the question I would ask is, how can you use actual social media as the forefront to actually get into that element. I know you can actually get people to come to you from social media, but sometimes people want to dig a little bit deeper into who you are, especially if you're a high-end product or high-end person. People want to know a bit more about you, and they want to just go and have a look at where you're coming from, what you're about, and why should they come to you.
Yeah, I 100%. And obviously we talked quite about a few of those today. Another very good way is video, of course, as a case in point. And Alex, you don't mind me just seeing a bit of your thunder here. I won't go into details anymore. I'm sure you'll be comfortable with. But Alex is one for almost micro personalization. If you ask Alex, Alex, if you ask Alex, he will prepare a personal 7 or 8 minute video just for you, looking straight at the camera, pitched absolutely perfectly in the best possible way. And he's presented himself as being an expert, and without revealing anything that's confidential. I know for you that's borne some really good results of picking up some really high value work, hasn't it? So video itself is a really good medium for accelerating the relationship of trust. And it doesn't have to be just you talking to camera or me talking to camera, but it actually can be interviews, someone asking someone to interview you online and the way around. So, and that integrated with a social media strategy as well, or email, or whatever it is with social media, can be very powerful. So,
and I think your point is very well made, Vernon. This whole online presence now is your shop front. And what frustrates or annoys me is when you see large companies who spent a lot of time building their brand, protecting their brand, and you have someone in their social media department putting stupid comments out on Twitter, right? And suddenly, or whatever they might be using, suddenly the value of the brand is impacted. It's almost a Gerald Ratner type thing. Yeah. We sell crap, that's why it's cheap. Yeah. Right? And your spotty youth, and I'll be unfair here, your spotty youth on social media can impact your brand so quickly. And you will regularly see in the press how some company has had someone call one of their customers on social media the C word or something stupid like that, right? And so, come on, guys, come on. Why aren't you setting standards for this kind of thing? Now, that's for big companies. Equally, I used to be involved in the running of a small charity, and we were very precious about the way we portrayed our online persona. And we actually pulled one of our volunteers up one day because they had made a very adverse political statement in their private life, but it flagged over onto our social media feed. And that was not what we wanted. So this whole thing, how do you present yourself and protect your brand at the moment, I think is very important.
Yeah, I love it. Great. Thank you. As well, that's a big question. Muriel, I know you'll give me an easier time. Have you got something, obviously you were on the same table as Alex, weren't you? Is there something else you picked up here, which I think possibly might need to make this last question as people agree, because we're going to go over time.
No, because Alex picked up everything and he's asked you exactly what was discussed. So I think you're going to get away light with me.
Oh, right, okay. I've got a feeling that Chris is going to come with a nasty one, but not yet. Right, I think what we better do, if it's all right, is we better just wrap on the last 3 or 4 slides, if that's okay. So just spare me a second. Yeah, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties we had earlier on. So I think a large part of it, I'm afraid, is because I don't know, we're trying to learn the platform. I think we'll either continue this platform next week, or if we're not 100% sure about some of the answers we get back from the technical team, we obviously may need to revert back to what we were doing before. But we'll see how it goes, and I'll listen to what you guys have said today. So any comments, good or bad, make a note in the chat for us, because we'll read all the comments afterwards. Okay, or send me an email, or Muriel an email, whatever. Because we're really interested to listen to what's important. Now, I'm sorry to mention this. I'm going to mention this again today. I won't go into any detail here, but this is about to finish at the end of November. A lot of the applications are already, the whole system getting stacked up. Just if you are interested in looking at that, explore it now, because even though it still sounds like a long way off, I'm not sure whether the applications actually have to be approved in that time. So if you approve it, put an application in now, and it takes on 5 weeks to process it, that it may technically run out of time. And there was a bit of debate last time round as to whether people would actually have got their funds. So if you feel you need money for your business, just don't dismiss it. Certainly look at it as being an option. Now, we did talk a little bit earlier on about referrals, and Chris raised this as a really good question earlier on, but don't underestimate it. Referrals are very important along the lines we talked about here. We've already discussed timings on the previous session for those who joined us at 5 o'clock. A quick reminder there, and the way you can access it. We've got a great guest speaker next week, Paul Hargreaves, and these are the points that he's going to discuss. Chris, it's your guest. Chris, do you want to give us a very brief insight a little bit about Paul?
Paul is he's the author of Forces for Good, and he is a B Corp ambassador. So I think there's 230 or so companies in this country who operate under B Corp principles, which is about being a force for good, really. And they sign up to things like the top person in the business will earn no more than the five times the average income of an employee. Where I was thinking the big FTSE is something like 230 times. But he wrote this book, and I was connected to him and recommended to interview him. And he was a fascinating guy with a great background. He runs a business called Orchard. I think it's Orchard Fair. Is it Orchard Fair? I remember now. It's been a while. Cotswold Fair, sorry. Cotswold Fair, and they basically distribute into all sorts of organic foods into farm shops and things like this. But they're looking over time. How can they move to electric vehicles and things? And he's always looking at how can they do things in a more environmentally friendly, more caring way. They've got great principles with their staff, and I just think having him, who is this ambassador for B Corp, really understands these principles, has made a successful business out of being a force for good, and gets the opportunity to speak on all sorts of platforms around this topic. He'll be a really interesting conversation in this conjecture. And we need lots of good news at the moment. And we do actually live in a time in history where actually there's war, racism, violence, poverty, and disease, all this sort of thing. But actually, it's still a fraction of what it used to be. And there's a lot of good things to celebrate. We will get over this period around COVID, and I think if we can surround ourselves by good messages and build our businesses to help solve the problems we have to. It's going to be, an exciting time, I think. So I think he'll be good next week.
Yeah, and we talked a bit earlier on about pivoting businesses, and I'd be really interested to hear what Paul's got to say about that as well, actually, because I suspect a large part of his business is online. Chris, would that be fair to say? And also through partners and resellers, and wholesalers, and
yeah. They supply into those kind of parties and have good relationships.
I think a lot to learn from him next week, so I'm really looking forward to that. So, sorry, say that again, Chris.
Yeah, he's a good man. And it's good. I had the privilege of having done over 400 interviews now, so I can cherry pick for this some of the best people that I've interviewed, and he's a good man. So I would really recommend you join that next week. And if you've got people in your network who are interested in making their business even more kind of worthy, but also being more successful through that too, then invite them along.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, that would be very much appreciated, genuinely, because we'd love to make this a much larger, vibrant community with your help. So thank you for that. So moving on a little bit from there, if we've got our mini conference, which is on Tuesday, it starts at 2, finishes at 5:30. And with that, we're going to be looking at those main areas as on the slide there. As Muriel mentioned earlier on, we do have a prize which is going to be worth just under £1,000, or it's £997 plus VAT. And there will be a few Amazon vouchers as well, so for a little bit of fun and pleasure. But the big thing with that, of course, is the takeaways you'll take from it and what you can implement on your business. And we'll do our best we can to make that highly interactive as possible. So if you've got any questions, we'll try and bring you on stage, or we'll bring you into the stream, and I'm sure it'll be a great experience. Sort of and the way you can get to those is, as we talked about earlier on, if you go to the homepage of the website, you can get straight to all those options from there. And if you think about one you'd like to ask, so if someone that you know, like, respect and trust, by all means, do that. We are here for you, okay? And, it's times like this that we all do need to stand together. And I'm very grateful for those of you who are the regulars amongst us all as well, because you do make it special. And we're here to help you in your growth. And there are the contact details. So for next week, again, just follow the normal process. Ignore these links to a degree at this stage, because we are just trying to decide whether to stick with what we've got here or to revert back to some other things. So just follow the normal messages that come from the calendar invite, and that will always point you to the right place. But without further ado, I just want to thank you very much. Also, a big thank you to Alex and to Chris and to Muriel and Vernon for stepping in. And for those of you who've joined us today, where there's been a few problems, you've been very patient, and that's very much appreciated. So have a great week, everyone, and thank you very much for your continued support. Take care. Thank you very much. Cheers.